Welcome to night 3 of our presentation on our world-famous freedoms. From whence did they come and what did they cost? The first night we learnt that we all enjoyed these wonderful freedoms, but few realised what they cost and where they came from. We also went through our history. We saw the royal family was the protector of our freedoms, and we went through history. We found out that the Roman Catholic Church had been the enemy of our freedoms, and we found that the Protestant churches were raised up, and it cost a great deal of blood, to Protestant blood, to enjoy the freedoms that we've got tonight. And so here we see our presentation tonight. We came down last night, and in the reign of George the Sixth, or George the Fifth, we found that Germany had tried to regain its secular power. Remember last night you saw that Cardinal Manning, the Roman Catholic Cardinal of England, had said that we're prepared to deluge Europe in blood in order to regain the Pope's lost secular ascendancy. Remember, he had lost it at the time of the French Revolution. Before that, through the Dark Ages, for nearly 1260 years, Rome, church and state, had ruled. Remember, the two fingers, when the Pope gives that sign, it shows the power of Rome. The blessing of the church is the higher finger, the bride of Christ, according to them. And the smaller finger is the secular power of the king, which is subservient to the higher finger. And so we saw that Cardinal Manning said that the papacy was prepared to deluge Europe in blood. In order for them to gain their secular kingship back, in order for that, they had to get a strong power on their side. And we saw in the First World War, they'd aligned themselves with Wilhelm II of Germany and the German nation and the Austrian Catholic nation. And they'd fought against the English Protestants, the French atheists, the Russian Orthodox, and the United States Protestant country. And so we saw that Germany lost that war, and we still have our freedoms today. And then we saw after this war, we saw that they were still trying to regain their lost ascendancy. And we see on this slide that the Catholic priests burnt the Bibles in the streets of Rome. The Bible was publicly burnt in the streets of Rome in the presence of a large concourse of people, presided over by dignitaries of the Catholic Church in front of the Church of St. Maria in Dominica. That was from Protestantism Imperilled, page 77. We saw here at the same time, or about that time, that, remember the principle of Cardinal Newman and the other papists within the Church of England before they turned over to Rome. They knew that the English would never, ever go up the steps of the Catholic Church because they hated the very ground it was on, and that hatred was embedded and it was rooted in the reign of Mary Tudor, Bloody Mary, who killed 400 approximately Protestant men for putting the Bible above the traditions of the Roman Catholic Church. And so the mothers of England told their sons down through the centuries to hate popery because of these great men who were burnt at the stake by Rome. So Rome exposed herself, and she knew that her intolerance would never be accepted by the English, and so they had to take England by taking it through the Church of England, not inviting the people to come into the Catholic Church. They realised that wouldn't work. And so we saw that they tried to bring out the revised version of the Bible in 1881, Westcott and Hort's Bible, where they said the Bible was easier to read and easier to understand, but made by more intelligent scholars, so they claimed, and made by from older manuscripts, which they say were the best, but any investigation would see that they're the worst manuscripts. And so we also saw that with the prayer book, they put the hymnal in the prayer book and hymnal, the Mass was smuggled into its pages, just as it's been smuggled into the pages of the Seventh-day Adventist Church hymnal today. And so there we see the Roman Catholic Mass was found hidden in the New English Prayer Book of 1927. Did you know, or most people don't know, that that was voted down by the House of Commons, but the Church of England arrogantly said we're going ahead with it anyway. Such was the infiltration into the church at that time. And then we saw the Catholic Church and fascist state unite with Italy. And there we see on the left Cardinal Gaspari with Mussolini. A deal was struck and Rome got its secular power back, which it had lost in 1798, regained temporarily, and then lost it with the Roman question in 1870. And that's the Lateran Treaty of 1929 was signed with the papacy, and we see the medal on the lower left of that picture, that the medal was struck, and we see the church once again sitting on the world. And so it was a great occasion for Rome. The Bible actually predicts, if you look at our New World Order videos, we show clearly that Rome was to regain her lost ascendancy. That was predicted in Revelation chapter 13, there where the first beast received the wound, the deadly wound was healed, and then all the world wanted after the beast. That's in our New World Order DVD. It's a 4-part series with 850 odd slides in it. But back to this, the drawing board, Rome was prepared to deluge Europe in blood to get its secular power back, because that's where its power base lay. The Roman Catholic Church's only power is in being able to control the state and force its doctrines on others. The Protestants of England were always putting the Bible above that and a man's conscience, he couldn't have his conscience forced by the state. The papacy signed the Concordant with Nazi Germany in 1933. So most people know of the 1929 Vatican Italian Concordant, and Concordant is an agreement between the Vatican and the country concerned, and so that was signed in 1929, the Lateran Treaty with Italy and the Vatican, where Rome got its 160 acres or whatever it was back. But then we saw in 1933, Cardinal Pacelli signed the agreement, the papal legate to Germany, signed the papal agreement with Nazi Germany in 1933. The Vatican signed another concordant with Germany, which favours the church above other churches. Then we saw in the reign of Edward VIII, he reigned only in 1936. He visited Hitler. He was a friend of Mosley's, and they looked at a different angle of world history. They felt that the money power was ruling the world and that he was a puppet and was not being listened to. And so some people believe he is set up with his wife-to-be in order to get rid of him from the throne of England. And so Edward VI visits Nazi Germany before abdicating the throne of England. Many English Catholics supported the fascist cause. Below was the English fascist Mosley. He visits with Mussolini, the Italian fascist leader. They shared the view that Jewish bankers, their dupes, the Freemasons and communists, were causing the destruction of Western society through their liberalism. Excuse me, that's Roman Catholic thinking, because they believe through the doctrine of original sin, we have no right to have liberties and freedoms. We must ask all things of the state. And so the church, to have a stable society, the church must rule the state. And so after King Edward VIII abdicated, his brother George VI came to the throne. And here he is taking his coronation oath once again on the Bible. The English were the only nation of Europe to swear on the word of God, and they were blessed for it. And this is the message from His Majesty to the British forces. To all serving in my forces by sea or land or in the air, and indeed all my people engaged in the defence of the realm, I commend the reading of this book. For centuries the Bible has been a wholesome and strengthening influence in our national life, and it behooves us in these momentous days to turn with renewed faith to the divine source of comfort and inspiration. He made that statement on September the 15th, 1939, just 12 days after the declaration of war on Germany. The Vatican made a concordant with Japan. Many people realise they made a concordant with the Italians, the fascists, and the Nazis in Germany, but very few people knew they made a concordant with Japan. And you're going to see some tragic circumstances came about as a result of that concordant they made with Japan. Immediately upon his ascension, Pacelli, that's Pius XII, he negotiated a concordat with Japan. That's behind the black curtain, page 124, by Crittenden. Roosevelt and Churchill protested against Pope Pius XII establishing a Japanese embassy at the Vatican. Fruitage of this Vatican-Japanese concordat was soon seen after the Japanese conquered the Philippines and most of the Western Pacific. The Protestant missionaries were interned in concentration camps, but the 7,500 Catholic missionaries remained free. They were officially protected by the Japanese. And so we see that Pius XII, when he took power in 1939, many believers and students of Vatican history believe that Pius XI, that ruled after Benedict XV when he died in 1922, they believe that Pius XI was poisoned in order that Pacelli could come to the throne and start the war and get their way. At about that time, the Spanish Civil War broke out. There'd been a Republican government voted in Spain, and they immediately took all the favours of taxes and the best seats at the feasts of the nation from the Catholic Church, and of course that meant war. And so here we see the Church trying to regain its secular power back in Spain, and they were prepared to go to war. But you see the priests here giving the Nazi salute, along with Franco on the right of the picture. Franco's Catholic troops take mass before battle. Can you see the big sun disk monstrance in the middle of it? Because Roman Catholicism is mainly just sun worship. Remember in the 4th century when Rome, through church and state, united? That was bad enough, but they changed the pure principles of the biblical Christianity of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, and they brought in many things that were undetected by the people because they never had the Bible, which was the great detector of evil. And not until the printing presses started in the 16th century when Roman Catholics read the Bible and they protested when they recognised the errors of the church. And that's why they were called Protestants. And Rome ever since has tried to unite the church and state to take the Protestant freedoms off them and force them to recant or kill them. And so we see in here we see the priests sewing the crosses, and in the cartoon on the left and on the right we see the Pope or the Cardinal with his two-fingered hand sign ruling the state, the army and industrialists to return the world to Christ according to them. There we see the papacy again in the form of a beast ruining Spain. At that time, Hitler in 1934, the purge was caused by Catholic action. The SS destroyed a lot of the brown shirts, which was a very powerful organisation in Germany at the time, but all the evidence of horror, bloodshed and reaction in Germany piles up against Catholic action. There was a group of Catholic actionists working underground in Germany for a fantastic but daring scheme, the recreation of the Holy Roman Empire of a Catholic Europe. That was the Daily Telegraph, reported on the 3rd of July 1934. And so Rome was the head of the brown shirts and he was forced to kill himself. At that time, Pius XI, before he died, threatened Yugoslavia with attrition. The day will come, pursued His Holiness, and though he would have preferred not to say it, it had to be said. The day will come when many will be sorry not to have openly and generously accepted the great gift which the Vicar of Jesus Christ was offering their country, Yugoslavia. Of course, the great conflict in the Balkans is where the front line of Eastern Europe under the Greek Orthodox, it meets through Yugoslavia with the Croats on the Catholic side that meets the Western Roman Catholic Church. The Third Reich practices the principles of the papacy. It is the only world power. Here we see, remember Japan, Italy and Nazi or fascist Italy and Nazi Germany and Japan had all made concordances with or agreements with the Vatican. And remember, the Vatican was out to regain its lost ascendancy because there's the Vicar of Christ, They believed they were to rule the world by the sword if necessary. But Christ never forced anybody. He preached and let people make up their own mind and then face God on the judgment day for their conduct during their earthly existence. And so we see this principle. Catholic Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa against Orthodox Russia. Why did Hitler codename this attack Barbarossa? The Roman Catholic Frederick I of Germany was named Barbarossa. And Barbarossa means red beard. Barba and Rossa is red. He was the first to use the title Holy Roman Emperor. His ambition was to restore the Holy Roman Empire to the place it had occupied under Charlemagne. Catholic Frederick died in the Third Crusade of the East. This shows Hitler was also trying to restore the Holy Roman Empire, which he labelled the Thousand-Year Reich. And there we see on the right part of the picture, Frederick I. In Bavaria, Germany, is this figure of Frederick, the one who was nicknamed Barbarossa. Now we see with Hitler's war, they were rounding up people that disagreed, objectionable people, Jehovah's Witnesses, other religions that disagreed. They shot people at will. And now we see the, we see the Nazi badge or the swastika on the arm of the German soldiers. And yet we see in the book that it's a symbol of the Roman Catholic Church. It's a crooked cross. And now we see the German soldiers had God with us on their belt. Gott mit uns is God with us. The Vatican pledges support to Nazi Germany. The Catholic Church will give Germany all the moral support she is capable of. Now we see Hitler rejects Protestants, Ludendorff and Rosenberg. I am personally convinced of the great power and deep significance of Christianity. That's Catholicism, because Hitler was a Catholic. And I won't allow any other religion to be promoted. That is why I've turned away from Ludendorff. He was the great German general who nearly won the last great battle of the First World War. And that is why I reject Rosenberg. It was written by a Protestant. It is not a party book. As a Catholic, I never feel comfortable in the evangelical church or structures. And so there's Adolf Hitler meets with a Catholic bishop there. Catholic cardinal reviews German Nazi troops there. You see, these nations were trying to regain the Pope's ascendancy over the world, but Christ himself had said in John 18:36, "My kingdom is not of this world." And yet the Pope is claiming a larger territory than his professed leader claimed. And so we see they're trying to bring the world back to law and order. Here we see the priests with Catholic clergy give Nazi salute with Goebbels and Frick. Forced conversion of Serbs by Roman Catholic Church. The million Serbs were killed. The history books, the kiddies are not taught that at school. Here we see Hitler in front of the Nuremberg Catholic Church. Here we see Catholic Hitler praised before a rally, and there he is leaving the confessional at a Roman Catholic church. Here we see more priests in their Nazi salutes. What we're showing you here today, friends, is that the Roman Catholic Church was solidly behind the fascists in Italy and the Nazis in Europe, in Germany. And here we see Hitler with the papal nuncio. They believed they were doing God's work. They believed they were crusaders. But Christ said, harm no man. Preach the gospel. That's the commission of Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Not force anybody. They failed to realise the separation of church and state in Matthew 22, 21, where Christ said, give unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and give unto God the things that are God's. So our worship is due to God, and as one of the great founders of the American nation said, if a man is a law-abiding citizen, his religion is his own business. And so the religion, Roman style, is forced upon you, but the separation of church and states prevents them from forcing their religion on you. Here we see Cardinal Stepanek, a war criminal, convicted for 16 years jail after the Second World War. He was the head of the Croatian Catholic Church. He's with Anton Pavelic, there. They were both Nazis. The Catholic Church got him out after 4 years in jail. The Vatican fully supports Hitler and Mussolini. Today, Hitler and Mussolini, the arbitrary dictators, threaten the peace of the whole world, and they are fully supported in their destruction of freedom by the Roman Catholic hierarchy. Here we see newspaper clipping of the time, showing the Nazi army was praised by the German Catholic bishops, were loyal. German soldiers rallied by the church. War prayer. Catholic Hitler learnt much of the Jesuits. I learned much from the Order of the Jesuits, Roman Catholic secret police. There has never been anything more grandiose on the earth than the hierarchical organisation of the Catholic Church. The Vatican Nazi links exposed. Jesuit documents allege Church collaborated with Nazis in World War II. Here we see the forced conversion of Serbs in the top of this picture by Roman Catholic priests. And at the bottom, we see this man about to have his throat cut. These pictures were taken from dead Ustashi soldiers. This man was a Serb Orthodox from Yugoslavia, and he refused to accept Catholicism, and he's about to have his throat cut. Terrible. Here we see the Vatican blesses the genocide against the Serbs. According to the teaching of the Catholic Church, both the genocide committed against more than 500,000 innocent Serbs during World War II and the genocide which is being committed today have had the blessing of the Vatican as a nation of a higher order. That's the Late Line ABC TV News, 31st of March 1992. The Vatican absolves Catholics who killed Serbs. Here's another picture taken from dead Croats, Roman Catholic Croats. These two Serbs are about to have their throats cut. The priest told Nikola that Ustashi were absolved in the advance from the sin of killing and slaughtering Serbs, and that the new Croatian government and their great leader Hitler personally had relieved him from all responsibility. That's blasphemy, friends. Only Jesus Christ can forgive sins, and they must repent and put away their sins. A Catholic protests at his church's genocide. In all these unprecedented crimes, worse than pagan, our Catholic Church has also participated. There's the priest again giving the Nazi hand signs. Croatian fascist leader acknowledges Catholics' help against Orthodox Serbs. Your actions played a significant role in our political struggle. That's Anton Pavelic. Papist worldwide protest war crimes Artunovich's arrest in 1984. And what are they trying to do to one of our real leaders? Anton Artunovich, Croatian and Catholic, who is being defended by the champions of freedom. That's the Catholic Church. This is a Catholic writing this. The justice and truth, that's Catholicism, against the godless Jews and their money. Orthodoxy, that's the Eastern Orthodox churches who rejected the papacy as the world leader of Christendom in 1054 AD. And communist Protestants everywhere. That's who they believe. There he is in his heyday, Andrej Artukovic, the Ustashi Minister of the Interior and later Minister of Justice under Ante Pavelic, was in charge of the Croatian government's genocide policies and supervised its extermination camps. And so he got caught. And here we see at the top, a priest spills streams of innocent Serb blood. The Catholic Church has used all means to Catholicise forcefully the remaining Serbs. And while the land streamed with the innocent blood of martyrs, and while the groans of the surviving unfortunates are still audible, the friars and nuns carried Ustashi knives in one hand and a cross and a prayer book in the other. There is a picture at the top, a priest by day and a killer by night in his military uniform. Pius XII was a secret Nazi supporter. Having become Pius XII, Pacelli seemed to be an out-and-out pro-integrist and Germanophile. He is called the German Pope. Germany is in his eyes, called upon to play the role of the sword of God, of the secular arm of the Church. In 1943, he refused to condemn publicly the concentration camps. And so he saw that Rome could regain its lost ascendancy through the power of Germany. Just the same as the Pope, the Vatican, Benedict XVI had tried to do it during the First World War using the arm of Hitler, or Kaiser Wilhelm II in Austria, a Catholic country. Here we see the Pope trying to do the same thing. Hitler's Jewish policy was papal. As for the Jews, I'm just carrying on with the same policy which the Catholic Church has adopted for 1500 years. And when it has regarded the Jews dangerous and pushed them into ghettos because it knew what the Jews were like. I didn't put race above religion, but I do see the danger in the representatives of this for the church and state, and perhaps I'm doing Christianity a great service. That was recorded by Adolf Hitler. Here we see Pius XII ignores pleas from Jewish victims. German embassy to the Holy See of Rome. Although he had been urged on all sides to do so, the Pope has not been led into making any demonstrative reproof against the deportation of Jews, despite the fact that he must expect to see this attitude attacked by enemies and exploited by the Protestant circles of the Anglo-Saxon countries in their anti-Catholic propaganda. The Holocaust victims cynical at Vatican silence. I frankly told the Pope how those of us who had been deported were unable to understand why the Vatican failed in its duty to organise some assistance during our imprisonment and why it did not unequivocally condemn the Nazi criminals responsible. Hitler dies defending Catholicism. This is a statement by Franco, the dictator of Spain, a Roman Catholic fascist. Adolf Hitler, son of the Catholic Church, died while defending Christianity. That's Catholicism, of course. With the palm of the martyr, God gives Hitler the laurels of victory. Well, that's like two boxers, and one knocks the other one out in the second of the first round, and the referee gives the fight to the guy knocked out on the floor. Hitler lost the war, and that's why we still have our freedoms today. Hitler was mourned in Dublin. Irish Prime Minister Dr. de Valera called on Dr. Hempel, the German minister, on Wednesday evening to express his condolence on the death of Hitler. The swastika at the German legation was flown at half-mast in Dublin, and that's at 58 Northumberland Street. Russia believed the Vatican was working behind the scenes to free the Nazi criminals. The Vatican is trying to unburden Nazi Germany of the responsibilities for her crimes. Pius XII intervenes for Nazi criminals but ignores Holocaust pleas. A great voice, that's Pius XII it is said, rose in his, von Papen, he was a Nazi, favour. He was on trial at Nuremberg for war crimes, but the Pope stood up for him, a voice which we in the concentration camps vainly hoped to hear declare its reprobation, denounce our misery and castigate our executioners. But von Papen was far more entitled than we to do this intervention. As for us, those of us who were Catholics, that's liberal Catholics, found greater refuge and put more love into appealing directly to God, who does not bargain. Here's von Papen as one wonders whether von Papen will be saved by the errors of Rome, by the efforts of Rome. It has been confirmed that the Church has weightily intervened in favour of Franz von Papen, and of course their influence paid off. Then came the rat lines. Vatican and the US operate the rat lines. We're conniving with the Vatican and Argentina to get guilty people to havens in the latter country. That's prime time, an ABC television documentary stated 60,000 Nazi escaped down the rat lines operated by the Vatican. After the war was lost, all these criminals and the Nazis who had killed many, many civilians knew their days were numbered. And so the Vatican came to their assistance, and through Catholics within the Red Cross, they forged for them or gave them false passports with new names on them, and they were transported down at night they kept them hidden in monasteries and nunneries, and they eventually went down the Ratlines, which is the trail they took down to the southern ports of France and into Italy, where they were shipped to Argentina. Many of them ended up in the United States. Many of them ended up in Canada. But many of them ended up in Australia as well. And some of them are still there to this day. Then we came to the reign of Elizabeth II. She reigned from 1952 and she still reigns today. She took the oath. The Queen receives a Bible at her coronation. Our gracious Queen, we present you with this book, the most valuable thing that this world affords. Here is wisdom. This is the royal law. These are the lively oracles of God. Blessed be he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this book, that keep and do the things contained in it. For these are the words of the eternal life, able to make you happy for evermore, through faith, which is in Christ Jesus, to whom glory be for evermore. Amen. There she is, with her hands upon the Bible, taking the oath. And during her reign, the Vatican helped Nazi escape. Former Nazi says the Vatican helped him escape. There he is as a young man on the right of that picture, and as an old man when he was captured. And what did he say? He said that the church helped him. Among Tauveur's friends were influential figures in the Catholic Church. He was frequently hidden at convents and monasteries. Prompted by lobbying from church officials, President Pompidou secretly pardoned Tauvour. But when L'Express magazine exposed the pardon, it caused an outcry. Time magazine, March 28, 1994. And there he is on trial. So the Catholic Church, priest-sheltered Nazi war criminals. The Church is repentant. French Catholic prelates will make a formal declaration of repentance today for the Church's wartime support of the collaborationist Vichy regime on the 57th anniversary of the first anti-Jewish laws enacted by the government of Marshal Philippe Pétain, the great French general and Catholic. The declaration will be made public in Dragny, the site of a wartime transit camp for deportees on the outskirts of Paris. All bishops from the Paris region will be at the Drancy Camp Memorial, along with the bishops from all the dioceses where camps run by the Vichy government existed during World War II. The Church is following the state, which has admitted authorities played an active role in deportation of Jews to Nazi concentration camp. Holocaust at the centre of the saint dispute. They were trying to make Pope Pius XII, the Nazi, a saint. Well, this is taken from the Greek heritage, whereby the great heroes were made into lifelike gods. And so the Catholic Church picked up on that, and they make people saints. But the saints in the Bible are those that have accepted Jesus Christ, and they're living saints, because the Bible clearly says the dead know nothing. But despite the fact that the saints are unbiblical, it doesn't deter the Roman Catholic Church from the publicity stunts of making people saints in various countries where the Pope went. Like in Australia, Mary what's her name, was made a saint, or is being beatified to be made a saint. And when the Pope Benedict XVI goes to England in September, they plan to make John Henry Newman, to beatify him as the first step towards making him a saint. And so it's a publicity stunt. But when they made Pius XII, tried to make him a saint, many of the people of Europe, the Jews particularly, said, oh, wait a minute, he's killed hundreds of thousands, or caused hundreds of thousands of people to be killed. Here on the right, we see a statement where the Vatican acted as a conduit for Nazi treasure. Controversy centred on the Vatican yesterday after a previously secret American government communique said the Catholic Church in Rome was used as a post-war repository for Croatia's Nazi puppet government for about 200 million, that's 80 million pounds, plundered from Serbs and Jews in the Balkans. And of course the Vatican covered that. At this time we remind you that the position of the Church of England was such that the Pope of Rome is that Antichrist, that man of sin and son of perdition that exalted himself. Remember last night we found out that the Pope had been called the Antichrist by every Protestant church. The Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Calvinists, the Lutherans, the Church of England, they all called the Pope the Antichrist. Today, they say he's a good guy and all the world is wondering after him. Somebody has got into these churches and changed their doctrines. Rome will not compromise through ecumenism. The Roman Catholic Church would be gravely misunderstood if it should be concluded that her present ecumenical adventurousness and openness meant that she was prepared to re-examine any of her fixed dogmatic positions. There's Archbishop Coglan came after Runcie as the head of the Church of England. He should wake up to these facts. There's Pope John Paul II kissing the tarmac at Gatwick Airport, London. People see what a humble, nice old man, but that's a Babylonian principle that when he kisses the land, that's his. The Pope visits sleepy Protestant England. There we see the papal logo for the 82 British visits steeped in symbolism. The pagan sun wheel is the same as the one at the Vatican, with the obelisk in the middle. The arrows all point to the keys of Peter, which symbolise the papacy's soon envisaged supremacy over the world's religions. Blue is Mary's colour and gold is the Vatican colours. So all the arrows point to the keys of St. Peter. The Pope draws a huge crowd at Wembley Stadium in England, this once Protestant country. Rome cannot accept other churches as equal. The Catholic Church possesses the wealth of the whole of God's revealed truth and all the means of grace. It is unable to concede a similar status to others. Well, we as Protestants don't believe that. We believe it's through Jesus Christ we're saved, not through any church, irrespective of how high its claims of authority are. And here we see Runcie and the Pope doing a deal which will benefit Rome and be to the detriment of England's freedoms. Here we see the Catholic Church says it never changes. There's Runcie and the Pope again. There can be no change in any dogma or basic teaching of the Catholic Church. For such a change would be a denial that the Church is the true Church. Pope to head a united Church. The Pope would be the universal primate in a reunion of the Anglican and Roman Catholic Churches. A high-ranking commission of both churches reported in London today. And so that was reported, the Herald, Sydney, March the 30th, 1982. Runcie knows what he's doing because I believe he's a Jesuit and I'm going to prove that to you soon in symbols. Father McNabb states Popery's final goal, but the final goal ought steadily to be kept in mind and rapid and constant approximation be made towards it. Sooner or later there must come the formal approach from the Church of England to the Holy Father, and we must recognise the fact that we approach the Holy Father not as bargainers but as suppliants. That's tragic, isn't it? So Runcie urges Anglicans to accept the Pope as leader. That's heresy. And now we see how Runcie is a Jesuit in symbols. Runcie's symbolism exposes him as a Roman Catholic traitor. Runcie gifting the Pope a painting of Papus, Thomas A. Becket. He is thus symbolically showing his rejection of the British monarchy and the acceptance of papal authority, just as the treacherous Roman Catholic priest Becket did. Remember on night one we showed you that Henry II had argued with Thomas A. Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he had said these words on the right: I decline the jurisdiction of the king and appeal to God and my Lord the Pope, by whom alone I am to be judged. Well, he's got some surprises coming to him on the judgment day because the Bible said we're all going to answer to God, not men, Catholic priests, who, if the newspapers are any indication, are more in need of a saviour than we are. But the point is, Runcie is giving the Pope this painting on the left in symbolism whereby it's not a picture of Latimer or Cranmer or Ridley, who Bloody Mary Tudor burnt at the stake in the 1550s. He's giving him a picture of a Catholic traitor, showing that he too is a traitor. And now we see the Pope reciprocated by giving Runcie, the head of the Church of England, a crucifix. Runcie bows down to a graven image, which is in conflict and against the word of God and the second commandment, and yet it is not lawful for the church to ordain anything that is contrary to God's word. Exodus 20 verse 5 forbids graven images, the second commandment. Excuse me. And Article 20, that comes from the Church of England, 39 articles. So Runcie is bowing down and kissing. Now, I was in Australia 2 weeks ago, and that man behind the bows is Terry Waite. He's watching the leader of his church kissing a graven image, and as a Protestant, he said nothing. Shortly after this, he was captured or kidnapped in Lebanon and spent 7 years in a small room there with militant Muslims had captured him. So God gave him some time out to think about what he had done there. How we see the Bishop of Rome hath no jurisdiction in this realm of England. That's Article 37 of the 39 Articles of the Church of England. And now we see a crisis coming in the Church of England. A crisis is coming in the Church of England. Decisions will have to be taken which will determine the future of the church and probably the state, and it may well be of the empire. And so the Church of England may disappear. It is entirely possible that the Anglican Church could disappear to make way for a united world church, of course, under the Pope. And then Pius XII in 1950 broadcast to Wembley Stadium that the Mary, or the England, was the dowry of Mary, and that's why they want it back. Sleepy English church falls for papal trap. The Right Reverend David Shepherd, I'm saying he's the wrong Reverend, or Reverend David Shepherd, the Anglican Bishop of Liverpool, and the most Reverend, according to him, Derek Woollock, a Roman Catholic Archbishop, are writing a book, Better Together. Well, Amos 3:3 condemns that. True Protestantism can never walk with popery because the authority of Rome is the Pope and the Church, and the authority of the Protestant is the Word of God. And the two, according to Amos 3:3, cannot walk together. They are unevenly yoked. One exposes the other. Vatican wants world control. Christian faith urged to unite under the Vatican. Now we see Thatcher speaks against the European Union, so must go. And this is an interesting statement she makes. Just when countries such as the Soviet Union are learning that success depends on dispersing power, some in the EU or the EC, that's the European Community, want to move in the opposite direction. And she didn't want to join, take England in, and so immediately they start a revolt against her. Thatcher stands ready to defend EC summit stance. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher meets with Pope John Paul II at the Vatican, dressed in black, showing her subjection to the Antichrist. The hidden hand forces Thatcher out of office. She was advised to bring the poll tax in, which caused a revolt in England. And so 147 Tories plan Euro revolt. They want to keep their pound and keep their identity. And so Major to hold out against Euro. And then the IRA move in with a mortar attack on 10 Downing Street, which is the residence of the Prime Minister of England. This is popery with its sleeve rolled up. If it can't get you to submit to Catholicism, it will force you by terror. Now we see the security question after IRA plants a bomb at a big meeting in England on the south coast, and the bomb was found just 70 minutes before it was to explode and kill many, many people. You see, the papacy believes that the end justifies the means, and that if you can blow up some Protestants, you earn some brownie points in heaven and may get some time out of purgatory. They murdered Lord Louis Mountbatten, and on the left we see there, and then the IRA plotted to kill the Queen. Then they got the Queen's cook to try and poison her, but he refused. Then we see one of the most tragic things they did. They blew up the Trooping of the Colours with these beautiful horses, beautiful black horses, their intestines hanging out, their blood running on the streets. Such is popery. And I'm glad, friends, that there's a judgment coming where the judge cannot be bought with gold and silver, and decision is final. These terrible deeds of cowardice by the IRA and Roman Catholics, sanctioned by their archbishops and cardinals through silence in many instances, will have to answer to God on the judgment day, who cannot be bought with gold and silver. And so the end justifies the means. That's their principle. Here we see 29 British Army anti-terrorist officers die in suspicious helicopter crash. They're all going to Northern Ireland. Somebody slipped a bomb on the plane and down it went. Remember, we showed you a picture on night one of the Queen's, one of her residents at Windsor Castle. There we see Windsor Castle is damaged by a suspicious fire. Then we see the Catholic mobs in Northern Ireland. It's a principle that Rome gets its way by getting the mobs on the street. In our New World Order DVD, which can be obtained, it's 850 slides, it's 6 hours presentation, we see the principle used. And to bring Marcos down in the Philippines, Cardinal Sin, who since died, but he got on radio in Philippines, and within half an hour, he bid 2 million Catholics out on the streets to oppose the president. Here we see fury at European Union courts force British government to make payouts to Roman Catholic IRA terrorist families. What happened, friends, that in Gibraltar, which is a British territory at the entrance from the Atlantic into the Mediterranean, we saw that the SIS tracked down 5 Roman Catholic Irish terrorists who were about to let a huge bomb off in Gibraltar and kill possibly hundreds of people during rush hour at 2 in the afternoon. This time the British SIS, they got to them first and they went bang, 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 bang. They shot the 5 of them dead. The families of the IRA terrorists took the British government to the European courts, which are Catholic, and of course they made the British government pay out huge amounts of money, such as the dictatorship of Rome. Now we see biased media poll claims Queen should resign. Well, that's rubbish. They never asked the ordinary people in England. They just asked a few chosen ones to rig a poll. Such is the dishonesty, but such is the principle that the end justifies the means. But I showed you yesterday in a slide in Romans 3, chapter 3, verse 8, that it's evil to do evil that good may come. The Vatican wants power again in England, but the Protestant monarchy stands in its way. Catholics on the throne in the future. The Queen should be stripped of her title as Supreme Governor of the Church of England. Remember in 1828, last night I showed you that the Roman Catholics pleaded to get their rights back because they had been taken off them during the Bill of Rights and the Act of Settlement in 1668, simply because the Roman Catholics could not be trusted with power because their first allegiance, and they could commit any crime to attain their ends, was for the benefit of the papacy and its goal for world dominion. And so we see that in 1829 they were emancipated. They were not allowed for 150 years in England in the army above the rank of sergeant. They were not allowed to teach in the universities, be in the diplomatic corps. They were not allowed positions of responsibility because many of them turned traitor to the very people that paid them. And so they pleaded in 1829, please let us worship God according to the dictates of our conscience. Many Protestants said, don't be deceived. That's the first step back to Rome regaining its lost ascendancy in this country. And that's been a prophetic call because that's exactly what's happening, as you're going to see in a moment. And so they were still barred by the Act of Settlement from having a Catholic on the throne or any monarch being married to a Roman Catholic. That is the English system that has given us the freedoms. They banned the Catholics from all positions of power because the Catholics were burning people at the stake, assassinating them. Remember the Guy Fawkes plot of November the 5th? They tried to blow up the English Parliament. They sent the Spanish Armada on England to force their Catholic religion on people, where gentle Jesus, their professed follower, had said, my kingdom is not of this world. It said, pray for them who despitefully use you and harm no man. And he said to the soldiers, be content with your wages and harm no man. And see, Roman Catholicism, while it claims to be Christian, is far from it if the Bible is our guide. And so the Queen should be stripped of her title as Supreme Governor of the Church of England. That's a Roman Catholic subversive movement, because they got, as I said, in 1829 many of their freedoms back, but they still want the right to sit on the English throne. And to do that, they've got to get the Queen off, and they've got to put a Catholic in there, but they must change the law, which the last Prime Minister of England tried to do, to allow Catholics to sit on the throne of England. And then our freedoms have gone. Stripped her of her title as Supreme Governor of the Church of England in what would be one of the most radical changes since Henry VIII became head of the Church of England. Such a change would overturn one of the most controversial aspects of the monarchy, that a Catholic cannot ascend to the throne. And so we see that newspaper heading on the right, call for the Queen to lose title as head of the Anglican Church. Here we see a far cry from the humble call in 1829 that they only wanted to worship God according to the dictates of their conscience. You'll see in 180 years how arrogance has now replaced the humbleness of 1829. Reiterating the same Catholic teaching, the Catholic Vindicator said, "Rather than our loyalty to the Holy Apostolic See should be in the least degree tarnished, let 10,000 kings and queens perish. That is, let them be deposed from their throne and become mere individuals. When the Pope and the Queen are placed in antagonism to each other, which has been done lately, and it has been intimated that Her Majesty would not accept a divided allegiance." That's from Roman Catholics, whose first loyalty is to the Pope and the second to her. We, that's Roman Catholics, are compelled to say plainly which allegiance we consider most important, and we should not hesitate to tell the Queen to her face that she must either be content with divided allegiance or none at all. Let us never forget that whatever her boasted authority may be, it is nothing and less than nothing compared to that of the Vicar of Christ. What arrogance! What presumption! It's a far cry from the 1829 emancipation. Queen's Catholic subjects now chide her. Here's another incredibly arrogant statement. English Catholics will spit on the British imperial law. Remember, they didn't say that when they're humbly asking for their rights back in 1829. Neither in England nor in Ireland will the Roman Catholics obey the law of an imperial parliament. That's Westminster English democratic law. They have, or are likely to have before them, two things called laws, which unhappily or happily contradict each other. Both cannot be obeyed, but both can be disobeyed. One of them is the law of God, the other is not law at all. Of these things we need hardly say which will be obeyed and which disobeyed. The law of God, that is the Pope's command, will be, or rather has been, and is carried into effect. The parliamentary lie will be spit upon and trampled underfoot, and treated as all honest men treat a lie that is rigorously disobeyed. The Vatican makes a stinging attack on Protestants. They say we have no authority. You need a visual confessional box and a visual church with the visual wafer and the visual priest in order to placate the desires of the Roman Catholic eyes. Catholics enter English politics. Since the Reformation, we have taken a marginalised and sidelined position, says Christina Oden, editor of the Catholic Herald. But with more and more members of the establishment coming to our fold, we're not going to be spectators anymore. We're going to be players. And that means Rome is getting back into the politics of England. Are Roman Catholics behind the Republican drive in Australia? Good question. This picture depicts the destitute Roman Catholic Irish being welcomed into New South Wales by the Protestant English settlers. What did they do? They were allowed to practice their pagan religion with Christian coatings, ice cream, but the first gratitude they did, they shot the Prince of Wales, who was the Edward, the son of Queen Victoria. In 1864, he was shot twice by Farrell, the guy on the left, who was the equivalent of the IRA of that day. And so there was an anti-Catholic riot throughout the British Empire, speaking as they failed or they didn't trust the Roman Catholics, the Irish Catholics particularly. And this is Father Kelly, speaks of slaughter and revolution. He's the Archbishop of Sydney. And I do not mind blood, I do not mind slaughter, I do not mind revolution, so long as we get what we wish to accomplish. Doesn't that sound like gentle Jesus, who said, harm no man? Excuse me. Excuse me. Australian Prime Minister Bill Hughes with Australian troops on the Western Front during the First World War. During World War I, Australian Prime Minister Billy Hughes called pro-German Catholic Archbishop Mannix a traitor to Australia. He forced a referendum and he told all Catholics to vote to pull the Australian troops out of the last battle in the First World War on the Western Front. He forced the referendum because he was on the side of Germany and Austria, because the Pope, Benedict XV, was on the side of the powers of Europe, Germany. And now the Catholic Australian government sells Singapore out to Japan. H.W. Crittenden, the author of Behind the Black Curtain, believed that the Curtin Chifley Irish Catholic government in Australia at the outbreak of war knew the Vatican-Japanese Concordant, or an agreement, allowed for Singapore to fall into the hands of the Japanese. Catholic generals gave secret orders for the Australian army to fall back without a fight. This left the British flank exposed, and the inevitable was the fall of Singapore. And 15,000 young Australians in their prime were captured, along with 50,000 English troops. And there they are, being captured because of the treachery of Catholic generals in the Australian army. Many of them never saw their loved ones again. They died there of disease and torture. Socialist Prime Minister Bob Hawke welcomes Pope John Paul II to Australia in November 1986. There, the Roman Catholic hierarchy welcomes the Pope to Sydney in Australia in 1986. There they are, all lined up, Catholic leaders in the army, Catholics in politics, in the diplomatic corps, the church leaders. What an outward splendour to the eye. Roman Catholic Keating becomes Prime Minister of Australia shortly afterwards. Keating, like all Catholics, has two loyalties. Firstly, to the papacy and its New World Order, and secondly, to Australia. Protestant Privy Council replaced by Australian High Court. 6 of the 7 High Court judges are now Roman Catholics. In the space of 30 years, however, the Protestant establishment has given way to a Catholic ascendancy. In the past 20 years, they have come to occupy prominent positions in business, the professions, the media and the major political parties, and they have made the running on key national issues. 6 of the High Court judges who ruled in favour of the recognition of native title in the Mabo case, for example, have Catholic backgrounds. So was Paul Keating, who led the legislative response to Mabo, and Pat Dobson of the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation, who helped sell it. And that's interesting that the courts are now... And what's the wrong with having Catholic judges? You saw under James II, King of England, who ran away when Protestant William of Orange came over to kick him out to restore the English liberties. We saw he had a Catholic judge in the form of Judge Jeffreys, one of the worst bigots there ever was in England. Catholic judge perverts the cause of justice in Australia. Pedophile priests are protected. And so why does the priest or the cardinal tells the Roman Catholic judge, you must rule against this man of God, against pedophilia, against his crimes against innocent children? Why? Because if you don't, you won't go to heaven, and then you'll go to purgatory possibly, or at the very worst to hell. So this Roman Catholic dictatorship is over the minds of Roman Catholics. So an appeal is about to be lodged against the Australian Federal Court decision overturning an extradition order for the 2 St John of God Order members, Brother Roger Maloney, 71, and Father Raymond Garchow, 58. The Australian last Army Chief was Roman Catholic Irishman Cosgrove. His service to Australia and East Timor helped make a nation Roman Catholic. They were all paid out of the Australian taxpayers' money, but Timor was to become a Catholic nation with the help of Catholic Australian generals. On Irish television, the then Australian Prime Minister admitted that it was probably in some respects the Catholic in him that he influenced his Republican stance. So the Republican movement in Australia, as you'll find out, is headed by Roman Catholics because they want to get rid of the Protestant monarchy, which is standing in the way of a Catholic law to be imposed. Here we once see the Australian stamps once presented the monarch's head. We see now Australian stamps now show Roman Catholic symbols. You see the blue of Mary and the gold of, that's Christmas stamps. Here we see the Queen goes off note. So they said she's still there miraculously, but they wanted to take the Queen off the note and put that old biddy on the right on. And Port Arthur massacre leads to gun control. At that stage, this man, Bryant, nobody believes who seriously studied this that he did the shooting, but he was the patsy and he was loaded up on Prozac. And what happened after Port Arthur massacre? Can new gun laws stop another Port Arthur massacre? One of the Illuminists' principles is that out of chaos comes order. So the New World Order will have the police and the army will be armed, but the ordinary John citizen will not be armed. And so Port Arthur was the first stage of disarming the Australian public. And so Time magazine failed to report that the man charged with the massacre at Port Arthur was on Prozac-type antidepressants. When I was in the United States, when the Pope visited 2 years ago, I saw the front page of the newspaper, the USA Today, about April 2008, and the United States Congress lambasted the drug companies for not letting them know or not advising them of the proven facts of research that those people on Prozac, there were terrible side effects towards violence. And that is why at Columbine High School in Denver, the guy was on Luvox, a drug that has the mind-bending drug, which has Prozac type substance in it. And of course, the active ingredient in all these drugs is sodium fluoride, which they put in the drinking water. And we see also in Columbine High School, the guy was on a type of drug, as was in West Virginia. We saw the same thing in West Virginia where 36 people were killed. The New York Times brought out the fact that he was on Prozac. Just as in Raurimu massacre in New Zealand led to gun laws, he was on Prozac type drugs too. And so what happened? A disarming conclusion from Time magazine. Shocked by last year's Port Arthur massacre, Australians have handed in more than 500,000 outlawed guns, disarming the public. Port Arthur, a conspiracy to hasten gun control. A lot of people, this is Pauline Hanson, a lot of Australians have asked this question and it's on a lot of people's minds. Miss Hanson's comments followed a One Nation newsletter that suggested the massacre was a conspiracy designed to allow the government to crack down on gun control. What happened? Immediately, she was put in jail on trumped-up tax charges. Then we see Pope Benedict XVI visits Australia, 2008. Shortly after that, we see Roman Catholic Tony Abbott now heads the Australian Liberal Party. These guys are standing up against the chaos in society, against homosexuality, against abortion and all these obvious evils, and they're going to return the world to Jesus. Well, so they think, but Catholics are getting into positions of power and they're going to return the world to a good old-fashioned Christian society. And if you don't obey their Catholic errors, you're going to be persecuted. And so we see juries on the way out. One of the great famous freedoms of England were the juries. Instead of being tried by a bigoted judge, you could be tried by a jury in your own hometown where the people knew you to be a crook or otherwise. You had the right to be innocent until proved guilty. You had the right to habeas corpus, which we discussed last night, where you couldn't be taken off the streets or put in jail without a fair trial, and you had a right to eyeball your accuser. All these things are being taken off us. Here we see in last week's the Sydney Morning Herald, 13th of May 2010, juries on the way out, trial now by Roman Catholic judges. Tough religious hate laws are coming soon. That was in the Dominion, Wellington, excuse me, in the year 2000. And now we see more spying powers given to the Australian Secret Police. It's coming, friends. There's a religio dictatorship coming. It's going to happen because the sure word of prophecy says that no man shall buy nor sell unless he receives the mark of the beast. Now we see letters to the editor. International Express, August the 9th, 1991. Here we see Catholics are well represented in the Republican movement. They say we owe no allegiance to an Englishwoman from the other side of the planet, yet their first allegiance is to a popish or Polish pope in Italy. That caused a bit of a laugh. It is often forgotten that the Queen is the defender of the Protestant faith. As many Australians are Catholics and owe their allegiance to Italy and the Vatican, could this political debate end up being a religious one? So friends, thank you for coming tonight. We're getting closer to our final conclusions tomorrow night. If you come back, you're welcome. Bring a friend, and thank you for your attention.